Good morning. My name is Barry Doyle. I'm a lawyer in Chicago. I'm here this morning to talk about workers' compensation coverage for traveling employees. It's an important issue for truck drivers because you guys spend a lot of time out on the road. And quite honestly, you'd probably be surprised at the scope of coverage for workers' compensation when you're a traveling employee. If you're watching, hit like, hit share if you have people in your network who you think would benefit from this kind of information, because it does have special application for truck drivers as compared to just about every other class of employees who might be covered by workers' compensation in Illinois. So again, what we're talking about is workers' compensation coverage for traveling employees, which covers just about every truck driver around. It's an important issue because there is so much time that truck drivers are away from home and are at risk of being hurt doing even really routine things. So let's kind of jump in and start with the substance of it. I mean, truck drivers, obviously, you guys spend a lot of time away from home. You're driving across the country. You're making stops. You're staying in hotels. You're staying at rest stops. You're going into restaurants. There are plenty of places you go where your work takes you. And it's one of the things I think a lot of guys really enjoy about truck driving is getting to see the country and being out and about. But at the same time, all that stuff carries risks. You can slip and fall in a bathroom at a rest stop or at a gas station or trip on a carpet at a hotel. Any number of random things that can happen to you that aren't necessarily risks that you would face at home. And in Illinois, there are certain rules about when traveling employees are going to be covered by workers' compensation that really are kind of surprising. And basically, what it comes down to is what the employee was doing at the time he was hurt something that could be reasonably anticipated by the employer. When you look at how the Workers' Compensation Commission and the courts have actually applied that test, it's been really kind of very broad in ways that surprise even me sometimes. There's an example of a guy who was at a convention in Hawaii, and he was out sightseeing with a group, and he tripped on a rock and he fell and hurt his leg somehow. Court said that he would be covered by workers' compensation because it's reasonably anticipated that somebody who is out on a trip to Hawaii would do some sightseeing. There was another case that came down where there was a group of people who were at a convention, and they took a team outing to do some recreational activities, and one of the options where they went was renting an ATV, and the guy's out riding the ATV, and he rolls the ATV over and hurts himself pretty badly. The court said that he was covered by workers' compensation. So, these are things that are obviously way outside the scope of what they were actually hired to do, but the court said that they were still covered by workers' compensation. Now, you take a look at what truck drivers do. You have your hours of service requirements. Once you hit your hours, you're mandated to take that rest. And as long as you're doing something that's consistent with your mandated rest periods, you should be covered by workers' compensation, which would cover things like eating meals at restaurants, staying at hotels, going to the movies, any number of things that really seem to have nothing to do with the actual operation of being a truck driver and being out on the road. As long as you're doing something that is consistent with what's required of you in terms of getting your mandated hours of rest for the hours of service requirements, you should be covered by workers' compensation. It's a very, very broad coverage that gets extended to traveling employees. Now, one of the things about workers' compensation is it's state law, and it varies from state to state as to who's going to be covered for various activities that happen. Illinois has this very broad scope of coverage, and not every state has that. Some states are very, very restrictive as to when you're going to be covered and when you're not. One of the things that I always say to truck drivers is knowledge is power. You got to know when you might be covered in Illinois for injuries that happen in other states. Because Illinois does have such broad coverage, and not every state has that. So, for example, if you're in a state which has a much more restrictive scope of coverage than Illinois, if you have the option of applying Illinois law, you may have coverage for workers' compensation in Illinois, even though you were hurt someplace else, that wouldn't extend that same coverage. And once you open up your ability to get workers' compensation benefits, you're entitled to get all of the benefits, which includes 2/3 your average weekly wage while you're off, payment of 100% of your medical expenses, and a lump sum for permanency that's associated with the injury that you suffered. So it really becomes a question of getting nothing or getting the whole range of benefits that are available to you. And it can be simply that Illinois just has better benefits, better access to medical care because of the way that the law is written and the way that the scope of coverage is extended to traveling employees. So when you put those two pieces together, potentially you have a very powerful tool for providing you for coverage for an injury that happens when you're off duty but traveling in connection with your employment. As long as you're doing something that can be reasonably anticipated by your employer, you're going to be covered by under workers' compensation in Illinois, even if you get hurt someplace else. In fact, being someplace else is probably one of these things that's going to be reasonably anticipated for traveling employees because you got to get your hours of rest in connection with the hours of service requirements. So the two things put together, really do extend workers' compensation coverage in a very broad way, and it's important for truck drivers to be aware of that because you spend so much time out on the road. So I hope this information has been helpful. If you think it's been helpful, hit like, hit share so that people in your network can get this good information for themselves. Knowledge is power, and the more people who have this kind of knowledge, the better off everyone is going to be. If there is some specific questions that you have, you can always message us or reach out to us through our website, www.rightsofinjuredtruckers.com. Fill in the contact form. Or you can call my office at area code 312-263-1080. That's 312-263-1080. The call is free. There's no obligation to hire us. We're happy to answer whatever questions you have.